Camley. I'm a state representative for New Mexico, representing Las Cruces and Mesilla, and here is your legislative update for the day. As many of you know, I do a lot of these when we've had official meetings. We haven't had many of those for the past couple of weeks or so, but we are starting again tomorrow with build-up for the 2017 legislative session, so I'm going to be doing probably a few more of these than I have in the past as we do things like new trainings, new situations, trying to figure out what bills I'm introducing, that sort of thing. But I wanted to reflect a little bit for you all on a trip I just took. I just spent 2 weeks in Great Britain and Iceland, visiting my girlfriend's mom and some friends of mine in Northern Ireland and Liverpool, and then staying in Iceland. It's a place I've always wanted to kind of go to over the last few years, and we were able to stop there for a couple of days on the way back. And it was vacation, so I tried not to work too much, but me being who I am, I kept up with a lot of the political things in each place and wanted to kind of share with you some of the things that they're going through. So in Great Britain, they're going through a lot of the same things we are. And in fact, as many of you know, the Brexit election that happened, many of the people voted for it for the same reasons many people voted for Donald Trump here for president. I think there's a real worry by a certain percentage of the population about how fast globalization has happened and how they perceive globalization as affecting them negatively. And this comes across with things like trade and immigration, and they're going through a lot of these same things. So that Brexit election, when we were over there, has actually been stopped by their Supreme Court, who said that the election itself doesn't give the Prime Minister a chance at just pulling out. The Parliament actually has to vote on this. And this is going to be very interesting because many parliamentary members from both sides were opposed to Brexit for a lot of very valid reasons. So do they, as a representative government, say, hey, look, this is a bad idea. I was voted in to make decisions based on information that I have that not a lot of people have? Or do I go with the decision that people made? It's kind of a very good example of direct democracy versus representative democracy and things that you learn about in high school government class. There's also there are also some things going on there with their federalism. So as many of you know, Scotland and Northern Ireland are part of Great Britain, but they have their own parliaments with different powers. Now, they actually have a lot less powers than we do as states. For instance, they can't tax at all. They have to rely on the central government in London making the taxes, and they can't do other things like setting the minimum wage. And in fact, the government in Scotland really wants to raise the minimum wage, but the government in London doesn't. And so they're trying to say, hey, look, we want the power to raise the minimum wage in our state through our government. Now, as many of you also know, Scotland tried to have an independence vote to be their own country a few years ago. And so all of these kind of federal government versus state government issues that we experience in New Mexico, they're also going over in Britain. I was also in Iceland, which was really, really cool for a whole lot of reasons. They seem to do a lot of things right. They have 1% unemployment. They have a very, very low poverty level. They have 80 cops for the entire country of 300,000 because the crime rate there is so low. Violent crimes are almost non-existent. And there's a lot of really, really good things about the place. And a lot of it's because they're very small. They have 300,000 people. A lot of them are related to one another. And so they have a socialist system of government, but they don't even describe it as socialism. They described it, and our tour guide actually said, we treat each other like family. So yes, we tax ourselves at a pretty high rate, but we make sure that people are provided with education, provided with health care, those type of things. And it was very... They didn't look at us in the United States as having a very good way of doing things in terms of the healthcare and education and things like that. But it's just a different way of looking at government. However, there's one thing that I did want to bring up that they aren't doing really well right now. Remember in the last election how everyone says, I want a different choice. I don't want this two-party system anymore. Well, in Iceland, they have a parliamentary system. And it means that a bunch of different parties get voted on and go into parliament. The problem is not one party got more than 50% of the vote. So to put together a government, they actually have to negotiate so that a majority of all the parties can come together and choose a prime minister. 2 parties have had an opportunity to try this so far and have failed. And there's a third party that's been given the chance to try this, and they're literally called the Pirate Party. And they're trying to actually put together a negotiated contract with all these other parties to get a working government and a system that becomes consistent for a while, and they haven't been able to do that. So as much as we have some worries about some of the two-party system aspects here in the United States, Moving over to a much more broad government does give you more representation, but it makes government a lot harder to form and a lot more irregular in a lot of different ways. So just some observations. I'll be back at you here later in the week with some of the stuff we're actually doing up here. I'm here in Santa Fe right now regarding the upcoming government. Thanks a lot for this. I appreciate you watching. And as always, if you have questions, comments, or concerns, love to hear from you. Thanks, y'all. Bye.